Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Not a lot of news this week. We did get the patch notes for the June release, where, well, it's basically a little bit of a maintenance patch. The only thing that sprung up there is that we will now in-game have the ability to see the damage types that the rats do and the resistances that they have. So that could be actually pretty helpful. We'll see how it actually works in game. I haven't been on CC in the last couple of weeks, well, because everything has been happening on TQ, of course, with the invasions and them expanding from phase 1 to phase 2 with all the conduits and all of that good stuff. So I think that CCP has basically been busy rolling out the invasions, and that doesn't leave a lot of development room probably for yet more content in the next patch. So this is definitely a maintenance patch, but, well, CCP keeps coming out with a patch every month, and let's hope that it basically stabilizes everything, that it has at least a couple of nice little features, and that we can then look forward to more interesting stuff. As always, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store. The police skins, of course, are here. We get a sale as well on the Luminaire Rising skin for the Vexor Navy issue and the Ferox. These do look pretty cool. Golden, a little bit of yellow in there, so that is quite nice. These are on sale 175 instead of 250 plex. We still have the In Rust We Trust skins front and center, and then here the Hyperion police skin. That does look pretty nice as well. And down here, Ninazu and Erebus police skin. We saw those last week. They are pretty cool. We also have a sale on the Nyx DOS. Let's see. Nyx DOS Ruvener's Bequest skin. Looks like there might be some typos in this one. Or maybe not. Maybe that's what it's called. But alright, another sale as well. Couple of small sales. And then, of course, the police skins. They look really pretty damn awesome. And next up, I guess we'll just move straight into the marketplace and stuff at 220. Let's go like that. So here is a plex. Alright, I was looking at the price for the ticker, and I saw that 3,600 of them were dropped at 4,172,000, and now someone else came in at 4,146,000, and that's in GTA itself. So let's take a quick look at the chart here. We are basically bouncing right off of the 4 million mark, but we're not breaking out back on the high trend. So here, more hesitation in the market this week. We're basically stuck right above 4.1 million for the sellers, right above 4 million for the buyers. Not a lot of movement, but we do see that people are trying to get rid of plex a little bit, and so we see some pressure on the price still. We'll see how long that lasts, or which direction eventually plex prices will move. That should mean that the multiple pilot train certificates are hesitating as well. Well, they are still down a little bit on a 5-day moving average. That's interesting. Now a decent chunk below 2 billion. Yeah, at least a little bit for the sellers, and look at the buyers right above 1.8 billion, and it looks from the chart here that the buyers might actually be winning out from time to time, because well, the average price is still going down a little bit, but a substantial amount of sellers definitely showing up below 2 billion at this point for the multiple pilot train certificates. Volumes are still abysmally low though, so just a couple of sales can definitely decide on the price here. Might not be that representative. Let's take a look at the skill extractors next. These are also flattening out, a little bit of an increase in price at the tail end actually. Very interesting. 466 million for the sellers, 461 for the buyers. I think compared to last week the margin has completely closed. This is only 5 million on this item. That is not a lot between sellers and buyers, and I think 466 was also the sell price last week. So here the slight upswing here is probably buyers actually going up in price, which is interesting. Still showing lots of demand for skill extractors and probably skill injectors as well. Let's take a look at those. Here are the large skill injectors. No. Okay, that's a little bit of a surprise. Actually, a small downward movement in the last week or so away from 1 billion ISK in the large skill injectors. 994 million for the sellers, 975 for the buyers. So we're back below a billion ISK. That's going to be good news for people that are looking to actually grab some of these large skill injectors. And so the first sign that there's a bit of a downtrend in, well, it normally can't really be plex. So I would say that this is a sign that maybe there's a bit less activity in the game, a little bit less demand for new skill points, even more characters, more activities in the game. It could be. It's still early, of course, to tell exactly what's happening here, but this is an interesting trend break for the large skill injectors potentially. Next up, we've got the small skill injector that is actually flat. So that is something that we also don't see very often, a difference in movement between the large skill injector and the small skill injectors. These guys are still flat above 200 million ISK, 202 for the sellers, 194 for the buyers, very narrow margin here as well. That's going to be interesting in the upcoming weeks, I think. And then after that, we still have the daily alpha injectors that are staying well above 60 million, so well above average for the year. 66 million for the sellers, 62 million for the buyers. Here, of course, this is directly purchased from CCP, so you're basically dependent on a CCP sale to get a buy opportunity. And then be a bit patient. Potentially though, 40 million to 70 million was the trade that could be made during the last 6 months or so. That was pretty damn nice, but of course, as I've said, you're really dependent on a daily alpha injector sale for this item to show such a motion. Next up here, let's move on to the minerals coming in at 635, or let's call it 640. And interesting, the price of titanium, look at that increasing price back above 6 ISK. That is very, very nice. And if we go for the sellers around perimeter, we've got some, well, all right, nothing too crazy outside of JITA. 668 for the sellers. Buyers are coming in at 623. Now that's a price we haven't seen in a very long time, and I think that we will see some massive dumping. We will see this go back down. Volumes are down as well, so this is quite a surprise, but a sell opportunity for titanium. A bit of a breakout. We're definitely above average. Very, very awesome news, I think, for people that love to mine and that would love to see the mineral market basically be less dominated by oversupply, which of course it has been doing or experiencing because of the Imperium and their Rorcal storm that just kept raging and raging. They've been deployed now, and so we're seeing that impact on the market. Very nice double jump now up above 6 ISK. That's definitely a sell opportunity if we look at the last year. 7 ISK would be absolutely amazing. Even historically speaking, 7 ISK for titanium is a great price. So getting to 6.5, 6.7 is really a very nice performance all of a sudden. Let's see if any of the others follow suit. So Pyrite went up as well from a really pitiful less than 4 ISK to 4.5, and we're managing to maintain that, so that is not so bad. 449 for the sellers, 440 for the buyers, definitely above average for the year yet again. Volumes not really going anywhere, so let's take a quick look in the last 24 hours. Not that much dumping, but if they do decide to sell 1.1 billion, yeah, people have stocks lying around there that they will try to sell at these opportunities, of course. After that, we usually take a look at Mexalon, which did jump up to 65 ISK, is not maintaining that too well. We can see an increase in volume here, probably a little bit of dumping happening. So we're down to 63.74 for the sellers, and the buyers are at 61.58. Still, considering this entire chart, this ought to be slightly above average. Definitely the best opportunity we've had in the last 6 months or so as well. And then Isogen, that didn't really move in the last couple of weeks, is still not really moving, barely getting away from that bottom 15 ISK price, and is now looking at 16 ISK for the sellers, 15.35 for the buyers. Yeah, still abysmally low. Isogen basically the biggest casualty of the Rorcal and the mineral change that CCP did. I think it's like a couple of years ago by now, where, well, they changed all of that up, and Isogen has basically become completely oversupplied for its use in the economy. After that, we have Noxium that did a nice little bounce up above 325 in the last week or so. can't maintain that too much either, but we're back in the 3 to 325 range, which is actually okay because we've been there for the whole year. 320 ISK for the sellers, 308 for the buyers. It's still right around the average, and considering where we come from here in Oxium, and considering the chart, the declines that we often see, oxygen for instance, titanium as well, pyrites not looking too good. Considering that, this is actually okay for Noxium, a pretty damn good performance. After that, we have Zydrine to take a look at, continuing a slow increase on the 20-day moving average away from 500 ISK. It's 538 for the sellers and 512 for the buyers. And then that is very surprising. Megasite is basically staying flat at around 450, just below that, 449 for the sellers and 424 for the buyers. There's definitely a difference now between Megasite and Zydrine, and it must be that for some reason there's more Zydrine needed in the economy right now than Megasite, that it commands a bit of a premium, because normally you're getting less Megasite compared to Zydrine per cycle of mining, because it's just less available in ores. So that's definitely something that is a bit strange. After that, we have a Morphite that is staying flat at 9,000 ISK, so pretty hesitant on my part to actually make any moves on this one. 9,000 for the sellers, 8,800 for the buyers. That is still very much stable at an average price here as well. So a bit of a comeback in some of the minerals, and most of them actually maintaining a decent price right now. After that, we have the PI market coming in at 1135. Here we go, let's take a look at these. Here are the broadcast nodes, back to a less than average. Try to work its way away from the bottom of around 1.9 million ISK, but we're right back at that. Buyers are again below 1.9 million, sellers are just above 2 million ISK, and the average price going down means that plenty of people are quite impatient. They're not willing to wait for that small margin between sellers and buyers, and so they are actively dumping to these buyers, which means that you can grab broadcast nodes for less than 1.9 million, which is definitely not that bad. After that, we've got construction blocks that had a pretty good time working its way back to 12,000 ISK. Then the bottom fell out back down to 10,000 ISK, bit of a halfway comeback to 11k around the average, but now it just can't maintain the price anymore. Just shy of 11,000 ISK for the sellers, but 9,900 for the buyers. Buyers below 10,000 ISK is definitely pretty low as well, so it looks like there's a serious lack of demand in construction blocks, and potentially a nice buy opportunity in the making. For consumer electronics, I had better hopes, because we managed to get back to 14,000 ISK after the bottom fell out here as well to 12,000 ISK. But here as well, that price range cannot be maintained. Sellers are now down to 13,750, buyers are down to 12,800. Again, a nice margin opening up, showing a bit of a lack of demand in some of these PI materials, which gives me hope for my idea here. I am definitely on my trips to Jita with my main character, keeping an eye on PI in general, because I think that with a lower activity in the game, what is one thing that players and especially active players can easily maintain, it is PI production, and as a result I do think that we will see some nice low prices at some point in the summer. Definitely something that I am personally keeping an eye out for. For the coolants, we are continuing on the same trend as last week. We basically have to give back all of the gains that we made in March with a peak at 16,000 ISK here, which despite that have not really moved the needle on the fuel prices, and we're still here just below 11,000 ISK, buyers at 10,500 ISK, so super narrow margin here actually, and this is basically the price that the market is willing to pay for coolants. Not a great price, but it's also not terrible. We come from a much lower price when we lost all the bosses a bit over a year ago. Next up here, well, almost 2 years ago actually at this point. Next up, we've got enriched uranium that's crawling back to 14,000 ISK. That's not so bad. 13,998 for most of the sellers. One is coming in at 13,500. Will probably get snagged up pretty quickly. And then 13k for the buyers. That's a healthy, normal margin, and actually a slightly above average price, I would say. Next up, we've got the integrity response drones, and that is quite different from the broadcast nodes. We can definitely see a departure from the bottom 2.25 million, above 2.5 million at this point, and able to apparently sustain that increase in price. 2.6 million now for the sellers, 2.524 million for the buyers. That is really the surprise. Definitely we're seeing some demand in integrity response drones, able to break the trend and work its way back to, well, an above average price on this 1 year chart. After that, we have our mechanical parts that are staying quite high. That is actually really nice to see. 12,900 for the sellers, 12,100 for the buyers as well. Again, narrower margin when it comes to the fuel related PI materials, and still a pretty nice price for you to sell. These are really easy to make. Mechanical parts on barren planets can be made in pretty big volumes, so this is great to see that price maintained. Shows decent demand for the good. Next up, we have our nuclear reactors that went to an absolute bottom price of 80,000 ISK. Let's see what the moves like. 95,000 for the sellers, but look at those buyers, 77,600. And yeah, if demand keeps dropping out again, I'm telling you guys, I think that we will see some nice opportunities this summer in some of these PI materials. Organic mortar applicators, another advanced PI material that is actually bucking the trend here, went to a really low bottom price, less than a million ISK on the average price. That's really low, and then now actually working its way back to 1.2 million on the chart. 1.2 million for the sellers, 1.1 million for the buyers, showing some serious demand for this advanced PI material as well. So it may not be in the advanced PI materials that we'll see those opportunities, because this is actually a very strong performance in what has been well below average for a decent amount of time here. Next up, we've got robotics. Actually had a little bit of a breakout that didn't last too long, but is currently still selling for 104,000 ISK, bars above 100,000 ISK. So this is actually still a decently above average price as well for robotics. Decent performance, I would say, for the year here. Self-harmonizing power cores next, also a bit of a breakout. Interesting, went again to a bottom around 1.9 million. Is now selling for above 2.1 million, and buyers have gone above 2 million as well. So obviously advanced PI materials outside of the broadcast node so far are doing decently well, working their way back to average or maybe even slightly above average prices. That is interesting and definitely puts this broadcast node decline here into perspective. It might actually be the one good that is lagging behind that you might want to pick up. After that, we have the superconductors continuing its nice little ballad across the 12 to 13k range. Went back up to 13k, back down to 12k. We see that happen a couple of times, but on average superconductors is doing quite okay. 12,850 now for the sellers, 12,000 for the buyers, so working its way back up there, and has always been at either average to an above average price. So this is definitely not a bad performing good for producers, and I'm actually producing this on a couple of storm planets, so this is pretty good. This is a nice chart for the manufacturers. For people that want to trade, this is not so great, of course, because the moves are quite limited in range. After that, we've got test cultures continuing the decline below 7,000 ISK here, 6,900 for the sellers, 6,430 for the buyers. Complete lack of buyers is clearly shown here, but this one feels a bit risky to jump in now, although for like to get started on that test culture investment, I think is okay, but definitely don't plan to make the big purchase now. I think that there might be even lower opportunities later down the road. After that, we have the wetware mainframes. Well, it's trying. It's basically in the process of most of the other advanced PI materials here. Went again to a bottom of 2 million late May, and now is working its way back to its average 2.5, yeah, just above that. For the sellers, buyers are also up to 213, so above 2 million, 2.1 million, and yeah, working its way back to the average range for the year here. So very interesting note here that these advanced PI materials, at least quite a few of them, are actually up in price substantially all of a sudden. So some people are definitely taking some positions here as well. Maybe with a bit of patience, and if CCP does hold out on any structure announcements, we will see sharp declines and potentially new buy opportunities. But yeah, my eye is on PI for this summer to see if we can't make the right investments. Excuse me. Next up, advanced moon materials coming in at 1930. like that. Let's take a look at these. Perhaps Nosek action can make any motions here, but so far it's been, well, pretty individually that we're seeing some of these movements. Definitely not any trends that I've been able to spot in the last couple of weeks. So crystalline carbonites, for instance, 152 for the sellers, 133 for the buyers. So sellers have basically gone up a little bit in price. We are in the process of getting back to, well, still a below average price, but getting away from that bottom. But the buyers are just not budging. They're still at 133 here. Pretty damn low. Ferrite carbide, right, bit of a movement back up. So basically the same thing as the crystalline carbonate, except the 5-day moving average still has to work its way there, getting away from that 125 bottom, now up to almost 160 for the sellers and 150 for the buyers. So basically that's what still needs to be happening here in the ferrite carbides, that the buyers go up in price a little bit. After that, we have the titanium carbide that actually broke out about 2 weeks ago, up to 275 at this point, a 1-year high point. Now on its way back down, of course, an opportunity like that is easily spotted and people do try to sell, but we're holding on to 233 for the sellers, 217 for the buyers, so that is still above average for this 1-year chart, doing okay. And then we have tungsten carbide that is continuing its current range of around 200 ISK. Now slightly uptrend, 210 for the sellers, 210 for the buyers. That's interesting. Couple of buyers coming in at 210 as well. Might make tungsten carbide primed for a slight uptick here as well. But as you can see, there's no real trends or anything like that to spot. These are still mostly below average, and then you get the individual exceptions where you do see some spikes here and there. For the metamaterials next, we've got the photonic metamaterials continuing a slow decline to 15,000 ISK. Buyers are below that point, so this is definitely a 1-year low point, especially on the buyers here. It's for you to consider, of course, if you want to stock up on some of these photonic metamaterials. I think I have some myself. Next up, we have the plasmonic metamaterials. Completely different story. Actually saw a bottom in March and then in a couple of steps works its way back to an average 22,500. So that's a pretty significant difference in price here between photonic and plasmonic. And yeah, this one is actually on its average, 23,000 for the sellers, 22,000 for the buyers. Looking at this 1-year chart, this is not a bad price at all to be trading and producing and then selling this item at. After that, we have the non-linear metamaterials that well, also saw this. Now it's actually not a March but a January bottom price, and again 1, 2, 3 steps working its way back to 27,500 ISK. Some of these sellers are actually at 28,000 ISK, and then the buyers are up to 26,500. So this one is also doing something a little bit different and basically above average. And then we have terahertz metamaterials that is basically now very flat at 24,000 ISK. Yep, and then the buyers are at 23,000. Now looking at all of these terahertz metamaterials and then seeing what is happening currently in photonic metamaterials, I would say that, yeah, this does look like potentially a good investment, but of course this is tied to the area of space that they're produced in. So this is not really necessarily going to go up because all of these others are currently managing an average price of well above 20,000. But then if you do think that that might happen, potentially, of course, you are looking at a pretty good investment. We still have the other advanced moon materials to go. Here are the fermionic condensates flat at an average price, which is also managed to get back from a bottom price of less than 90,000 ISK. So 100k for the sellers, 95,000 for the buyers, decently stable at this average price. Ferrogel broke out a little bit again from really low prices. It's working its way back down at this point to a less than average price, 48,500 for the sellers, 48,200 for the buyers. Yeah. That is basically a market trying to actually find its range from, well, a surprise increase in price here, but it is definitely again trading below average. After that, we get the fullerenes, pretty flat below average here as well, so there's not that much to say. We're staying below 1,000 ISK. Hypersynaptic fibers, bit of a jittery motion, definitely up, but look at where we come from. Of course, 12,000 ISK, definitely below pretty much the entire chart here. We're up to 13,000 ISK and buyers are still below 12k, so this is still well below average despite what looks like a sharp increase all of a sudden. Then we get the nano transistors, and that's another exception here. It's actually breaking out into a second step. Although it comes from a really low price of less than 5,000 ISK, in 2 steps we're up to 5,500 for the sellers, and here is what's important, 5,200 for the buyers as well. So this does look like it is a bit more sustainable and back to an average price, maybe even above average for the sellers at this point. Then we've got phenolic composites continuing to its wavy motion at a pretty low below average price. Then we've got ceramic fibers that also tried to break out here, went to 500 ISK, not so bad, but not really able to maintain that, down to 485. A little bit of dumping happening here in the last 24 hours. You can see again quite a bit coming in, and then the buyers are up to 466, which is not bad. Of course, we're away from that bottom 400 ISK, but it's still not really great. We're not seeing too many really big breakouts like what happened here in titanium carbide. Still, if titanium continues to go up, that does mean that the Imperium should not be back mining, and other groups as well, of course, and so potentially it might mean that there is some serious conflict happening out there. Who knows, perhaps they will eventually get working on a lot of these refineries as well, and then we might see some actual movement in the advanced moon materials as well. Let's move on to the Tech 2 ships, see if there's an impact there at 2550. Like that, and we'll start as always with the Ares that had a nice jump up, of course, up to 35 million ISK. Is now slowly recovering from that, and we're breaking back down to less than 30 million, 29 for the sellers, 27 for the buyers. I would personally wait for a bit closer to 25 million before I jump back in on the Ares train, but that was a nice spike. That was in all likeliness due to some fleets being formed in Nullsec with the deployments that are happening there. Then we've got the Basilisk, same story, right? Late May, nice spike up to 280 million is not super great, but definitely a trade to be made there, and is now working its way back down as well. 244 for the sellers, 225 for the buyers, but again you see that we have gone down to as low as almost 200 million ISK. 230 can definitely be broken, so we're still in that transition phase, and the real question is, will we see more action in Nullsec, potentially a double spike, or is that eventually going to cool down, and then will we see a continued decline here again, with potentially, of course, another opportunity to grab a couple of these ships. The Cerberus went up in a wavy motion that it's been doing for a little bit. That's actually not that high in amount here. 220 at the low point, actually that's decent, 270 at the high point, and it's now back at a high point. 264 for the seller, so working its way back down already, unfortunately, on a bit of dumping. You can see that last 24 hours, full front page, bring that price down pretty quickly from 270 to now 264, and then the buyers at 245. They're basically not budging, and quite often we basically bounce off of them. That's what's happening here apparently. Then we've got the Crow. All right, late spike here, very interesting, up to 35 million ISK. Sellers almost at 36 million, buyers at 32 million. So here, if you manage to grab these well below 30 million ISK, you get a small sell opportunity in the Crow as well. Another interceptor, interesting. Does look like some interceptor fleets are being flown and lost in Nullsec at this point. Then we have the Guardian, again that same Nullsec story, of course. Logistics are pretty important, went up to 280 and it is now already back towards 200, so there might have been a bit of an overshot by producers here. 210 for the sellers, 195 for the buyers, so you're now buying Guardians for well below 200 million ISK, below the entire chart here, quite a bit sooner than I personally expected it to happen. The Guardian is back in, why not try to grab one for less than 200 million ISK and hope for some more action, try to sell it at 250 to 280 again. That would be nice. 1, 2, 3, if you count this one, 4 to 5 sell opportunities like this have happened before, so this does look to me like a bit of an overshot on the fresh supply, although we can't really see that in the last 24 hours or so, but in the last couple of weeks apparently they've worked their way back down a little bit too quickly, creating a pretty sharp drop and buyers below the entire chart. Interesting. After that, we get the Heretic. Unfortunately, interdictors not really moving anywhere, 70 million. That's about it. Bit of a lack of supply, but despite that, we're still at a pretty low price. Then we've got the Hound, which also had a decent spike up to almost 40 million ISK. In its process of recovering, but sellers 32 million, buyers 29 million, still well away from the buy opportunities where I made my trade at. Then we've got the Ishtar. Ooh, that is a surprise. Continuing the decline from 1 year low point, and it's being, despite having reached that, you could say here, mid-April, we're still going down. So now the Ishtars are selling for less than 190 million ISK, and the buyers are at 181. What might be happening here is that if it comes to invasion ships, the Ishtar is really not very useful because of the massive nerf to drones in the invasion systems, and so people might just be moving away from that meta a little bit because of that. But yeah, this is clearly a crazy low price, less than 190 million for the sellers of the Ishtar. Buyers are down to 181. This is really super cheap for what the ship actually is capable of, so that's a lot of ship for another lot of ISK at this precise point. Definitely, just like with the Guardian, in my opinion, something that you won't regret grabbing 1 or 2 of these if you have the patience for it. After that, we've got the Manticore that is still processing its nice spike up to 40 million ISK, with also a buy opportunity below 30 million ISK. Now it's actually still 45 million for the first seller. Let's take a look outside of GTAB because that does feel pretty high. But yep, that's it. Double spike up to 45 million for the Manticore. Buyers are at 32 million. This is a super big margin. You could try actually a buy now and then a sell now, but you gotta be very quick on this one. But that's where Gnostic Wars are good. This shows why Gnostic Wars can be great for the market, of course. That's a lovely double spike up to 45 million now for the Manticore. Very interesting. Then we've got the Munin continuing to stay at its average 250 million ISK. Yep, not much to say on this one, to be honest. Stealth bombers and things like that tend to be a bit more interesting. Here is the Nemesis, also back below 30 million ISK. So this is the loser, I would say, of the stealth bomber so far. Did know a spike up to 32.5 million and came from 25 million. So there's a small trade to be made there. He's also now in the process of basically recovering. 30 million for the sellers, 27 million for the buyers. But it's the one that has basically percentage-wise probably moved the lowest, and so not exactly the very best trade right here. Then we get the Oneros, also went up from an actual bottom of less than 180 million. And here with the Oneros, I always give this warning, keep an eye on the volumes. They're really, really low. So I would never trade with more than 1 Oneros at a time, to be honest. 185 now for the sellers, 170 for the buyers. That's back below the entire chart pretty much. Yeah, so that is very quickly also going back down. So this is very difficult. You can trade in this, right? 160 and then up to 210 million. That's a trade that you can make, but you can see how quickly we move back down again, and on how small the volumes are. This is very difficult to actually get that trade done. Next up here we got the Purifier, and that's a lot better than the Nemesis, of course. Look at these lovely spikes. Currently again working its way back towards that average to below average price after the spike, but went up to above 40 million ISK. Is now selling for 34.8 million. Buyers are already down to 29 million, so they know where this is heading. But this is what we like for trading, of course. 1, 2, 3, 4 very pronounced spikes up to 40 million ISK, and quite a few buy opportunities either close to 25 million or substantially below 30 million. You know exactly what to look for when it comes to the trading in these stealth bombers, and that market is lovely and alive. I absolutely love it myself. When it comes to my trades made, you can see that I have the Hound, I have the Manticore, so I do keep an eye on those. And the Nemesis, I already removed that, I think, but I also made a Nemesis trade, I think, on one of the previous spikes here as well. So this is why I love the Tech 2 ship market, and stealth bombers, logistics cruisers, they tend to be really awesome in that. After this we've got the Saber, which is a little bit of a disappointment. As I've said, I thought interdictors would move pretty violently as well, but nope, Saber staying really low, 66.7 million for the sellers, 62.8 million for the buyers, well below average and very flat in the last couple of months. Super surprising to me. After that we've got the Scimitar, which is, well, a logistics cruiser that has not moved as much as some of the others. So this one quite muted, also below average. Not much to say here. Also away from the bottom, so it's not really time to buy these either. And then finally we've got the Stiletto that is only now coming down from a late spike up to 40 million as well, and is now back down to less than 30 million. That's a pretty sharp drop off. That means quite a bit of supply. Yep, 87, 86. So this is like 3-day supply working its way back down from 37 million to less than 30 million. Its buyers are at 26. So again, showing that it is possible to trade and to have really big margins. I mean, 28 million purchase, absolutely possible. And then 38 million sell, absolutely possible. But you gotta be there at the right time, because there's lots of people, of course, trying to do the same thing as well here in the Stiletto. That's a lot of supply coming in, driving that price back down very quickly. And then, of course, you gotta look out for something like what's happening with the Guardian. If they come in with too much too quickly, of course, they might crash the price back down. If you see buyers go down to like less than 25 million, absolute no-brainer. Even now, it's getting very close to being quite potentially something that you should look into. So yeah, take 2 ship market, always a very fun one to take a look at when something of at least a decent size is happening in Nullsec. Next up, the Tech 3 ship market coming in at 35.20. Like that. Let's take a look at this. So the destroyers here, I was personally expecting them to meet up at around 40 million ISK, as producers were going to move to ships that were above that and away from ships that were below that. Now the Confessor is below that, and that price is actually going up to 40 million ISK now for the sellers, 35 million for the buyers. Supply wise, well, there's still a decent amount of them, but this is not out of line. We've got 50, 25, 28, 29, but what you should be seeing here is that in the last 24 hours we've got a couple of sell orders, but not that many of them. So this is basically a bit of supply drying up, and thus the sellers manage to go back up in price as they get a bit of breathing room. There's not too many confessors coming in, they don't need to compete, so they can wait and allow the price to go up naturally. Then the Hecate was above 40 million is, yeah, substantially, and we do see a bit of pressure on the price here at the tail end, and so I'm suspecting that we're seeing more supply here, and it's down to 45 million is. Buyers are at 42 million is, so still definitely pretty expensive. But look at what's happening here in the last couple of days. All of these sell orders above 20, 10, 20, so that's definitely a decent chunk of supply coming in here, trying to take advantage, of course, of that Hecate increased price, driving the price back down. So this is very good news in my opinion for this Tech 3 destroyer market, because I felt in the last couple of months that this was in a good spot, decent supply but not massively oversupplied like the mineral market, and that it had normal market forces working on it, where higher prices would mean increased production there, which would then mean decreased production in other goods, which would then mean that, yeah, those prices would go back up. And that's what we like to see, of course, in a healthy market where people can actually try to produce stuff and chase those margins, try to make as much as possible out of industry. And so the Tech 3, at least the tactical destroyer market for industry, looks to be alive and well from that perspective. We've got the Jackdaw that had a spike up to 55 million ISK, and so now we're already back down to 40 million ISK, so I should see some more supply. And that's definitely one that people try to take advantage of, and sometimes the market can overshoot that as well. This is a full front page in the last 24 hours. There's quite a few ships, 49 here, 44 here, driving that price down very quickly towards that 40 million ISK. Then we've got here 2-3 days ago also at 42 million, at 47 million. So this is lots of supply that was ready to take advantage of that spike, is now quickly driving the price from Jackdaw down to 40 million for the sellers, 39 million for the buyers. And then what we should see here is hopefully, well, a bit of a movement back towards the Confessor potentially. And definitely still a little bit of gap filling in the Hecate. And now let's take a look at the final one. Here is the Zwepel at 40 million. Very nice, actually 44 million. And fresh supply, half a front page, but you can see 1, 2, 3. So these are much smaller in volumes. Buyers are at 36.6 million. And here that is potentially where some of that Jackdaw production is probably going to move to now, because they're bring those to the market. They're forced to bring that price back down to that 40 million average average, and then they can look at the Zwebel. Well, if I can get some Zwebel production going, I can potentially get 44 million ISK out of that. And so now here, the market is definitely in the process of renormalizing all of these goods, and it's not oversupplied. It's okay. It's able to maintain around 40 million ISK for a tactical destroyer, sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less, but all of that is working quite nicely in what, to me at least, looks like a pretty healthy market. Now let's take a look at the cruiser market, because that might be a bit different. Here we get the Legion that went to a low point of 140 million ISK and did so, if you watch my previous EVE talks, on super low supply. So that was very surprising, and here now we do see that the Legion went up in price to 157 like about 10 days ago, and then you see that more supply is starting to finally come in here as well, which, well, is interesting. It means that basically the market is trying to take advantage of this, what for them is a good price at 157 million. I mean, it's below average, it's not great, but even that small tick up here means that some production and some supplies are coming in. Is this still primed? Thus, when this was so low and basically on zero supply, I thought it was primed for a very big boost up, and it looks like, well, any increase in price, if this is also going to start to have this kind of a response for supply, that is not really that as high of a risk as I thought it would be. So yeah, very interesting that all of that supply is coming in already at this price here. Let's see what the Loki chart looks like. So same thing here, bottom price 150 million ISK, now a trend up for sure. This was happening when there were almost no Lokis on the market, which was really crazy to me, and why I thought that maybe we would see like a massive spike up all of a sudden. But here we see a bit of a muted increase in price towards 180. Yeah, 180 for the sellers, and here look at that in the last 24 hours from 180 down to still at 180. But this is where all these Lokis show up now all of a sudden, and that is going to keep the price from really spiking up too violently. Buyers are still down to 154, so this is still pretty low on the buyer side of things. But alright, it took a little bit of an increase in price for supply to actually show up, which is quite strange, very unusual. You usually reach these bottom prices on massive oversupply, and here that was definitely not happening. Next up, we've got the Proteus, same thing here, bottom at 130. We went up now to 150, 160. We're still at 151 for the sellers. Last 24 hours, this is where the supply is coming back in. It's not too crazy on the Proteus, 35, 34, the rest of them below 10. Quick look at the Loki numbers, that's quite a bit more. It's also selling for 180, of course, which is probably the most expensive at this point, so that's normal. And then we finally have the Tengu that actually is working its way back down to 150 all of a sudden, 152 for the sellers, 143 for the buyers. And yeah, last 24 hours, that's yeah, that's almost 2 pages of Tengus. So supply is back in the Tech 3 markets. But basically, the way I see this motion here in the Proteus, for instance, and especially in the Legion and the Loki, is that when prices reached a bottom, none of the suppliers and none of the producers said, yeah, all right, I'm gonna put more Lokis. No, they said, we're gonna completely hold off, we're gonna strangle this market, and we're gonna wait for prices to go up before we actually come in with the ships. And then now they do come in with quite a few ships, and then the question is, how long can they, of course, maintain this price, or how quickly, like with the Tengu here, will competition drive the price back down to those really low Tech 3 cruiser prices, which are not necessarily bad if you want to fly some Tech 3 cruisers, of course. But for speculation, I was personally thinking perhaps we should buy that and hope that Nosik comes in with a massive purchase, and then you get that maybe, I don't know, 50-60% profit margin. It looks like that's not gonna materialize, because all of a sudden here on the market we are seeing that the ships are there. They just weren't being brought to the market on these bottom prices, which is very unusual. I would say in the EVE Online market, it's usually oversupply that causes prices to dip down like that. So very interesting Tech 3 market, I must say, in the last year. I'm absolutely loving it myself. And then for the extra product this week, a bit of a request for the Tech 1 ships again. So let's take a look at Tech 1 battleships coming in at 4340. like that. And so we gotta look for ships, battleships, standard battleships. Let's see if we can spot anything. We'll start with the Amar ones. Here is the Abaddon, currently selling for 156 million, bars at 131. What I personally notice here is a complete lack of supply or interest, and I think that here we have basically a mineral chart where historically speaking super low. 150 million for a battleship is definitely not a lot, and so the margins are completely squeezed out of this market, and at this point competition as well doesn't look like we get a lot of supply in the Abaddon. Let's see what the Apocalypse does. Actually a little bit of an increase in price lately, but went as low as 110 million ISK on the chart, is now at 140. Again, supply is not great. Demand, well, there's some demand. People are trying to buy some of these cheap battleships for sure, but yeah, supply is pretty damn abysmal. Then we've got the Armageddon actually going up in price as well. Its low point 130 million ISK here in March, working its way back up to 162. Again, on a complete lack of supply. That's interesting. All of this coming in the last 24 hours. Are we seeing a... yeah, we are seeing some volume spikes. So there's actually apparently a little bit of buying happening, at least in the Armageddon. That's definitely a little bit of Armageddon buying, causing that price to increase potentially. You could actually get a decent margin on producing some Armageddons at this point. Alright, not what I expected actually, to see this upwards motion here at the tail end. Although, of course, titanium did just spike up substantially as well. So perhaps that is part of the equation there. Of course, it's the recovery of at least some of the minerals, especially titanium, might be a catalyst for this increase in price as well. But what is really noticeable is the complete lack of supply in Jita. Let's take a quick look if it's... no, it's not a player-owned trade hubs. That's 8 ships at a price that's right in the middle of them. So that's not where the action is. Let's see if that trend continues in the other ones. Here is the Caldari Raven, definitely worked its way up as well from 110 million to 140. The answer here, I think, invasions, shield missile ship, definitely great, better than a drone ship in my opinion at this point, and I think you can get a pretty decent passive tank on the Raven, allowing you to grab at least some of these Triglavian ships, warp out, get back in for the loot and the salvage. That is possible. 144 million for the sellers, 133 for the buyers. Nice spike. Bottom price for the Raven, 110 million ISK. And then supply wise, well, this is a little bit better, but this is of course a pretty damn good PvE platform, and it's not, I mean, 10 and that's it when it comes to the sell orders above 10. So this is not a lot of Ravens either. We should keep that in perspective. Not all of them can only have like 5 or 10 sell orders. Here is the Rock, flat at 150 in the last couple of weeks. Bottom price 130, 164 now for the sellers. Interesting that one is managing. Well, no, actually we have supply. It's more because it's Caldari, but there's one sell order of 10 and that's it. The rest is super low in volumes. 137 for the buyers. Next up here, we get the Scorpion that also worked its way up a little bit to 140 million at the tail end. Look at that lack of supply. 138 million for the sellers, 120 for the buyers. That's a complete lack of supply right there. Then we've got Galente. Let's take a look at the Dominics. That's also going up in price, back to 150. Bottom price 120 million for a Dominics. And again, a complete lack of current supply. We're not really seeing a massive increase in volumes or anything like that. It's just that margins haven't been there for that long. I don't think anyone is producing Tech 1 battleships at this point. Hyperion up in price to 180, working its way back down. Bottom price 140 million ISK. And again, it can't scroll down, and none of these above 10. So this is definitely pretty low in supply again. And then finally we have the Megatron. That's up in price a bit as well, able to maintain 140 million ISK, around an average for the year. Most of the year we've been at around 110 for a Megatron. And look at that supply. I'm gonna quickly check for around the... Nope, that's 11 jumps out to... Yeah, it's only here 4 of them in Perimeter Tranquility. That is pretty damn low. Tech 1 battleships in Jita. Yeah, that's not a big market anymore. Here is the Maelstrom, apparently out of the meta, because this one is not shooting up at all. It's now costing 120 million ISK, 127 for the sellers. And here we have some supply, which is basically crushing the price, keeping it from going up. Then we get the Tempest next, that's actually going up in price all of a sudden, not seeing a volume spike here, went to a low point of again around 110 million ISK, now 144 supply wise, yeah, again quite a bit less, we get 21 here, 10 up here, that's really it. The rest of them very shy in volumes. And then finally we've got the Typhoon, that's also going up in price as well, up to above 130 million, bottom almost 100 million is for a Typhoon. That's crazy. This is a great battleship. It's missiles, it's large drones, it's a crazy good battleship. And again, the lack of supply is here. It only works its way up to 135 million. I gotta say, it's a very good suggestion. These Tech 1 battleships, a lot of them are going up, so we should see some margins for potential markets, I should say, for producers. But this is a dead market as well. There's just no ships on the market, and any of these opportunities, I think, will very quickly get squashed by not a lot of ships, unfortunately. It's just, if you look at the trade volumes here, what's that looking like? Can we actually get a number on that? Apocalypse 10, 15. Oof. The Caldari ones ought to be a little bit better. Yeah, those can trade almost to 100 a day. But the Amar ones, yeah, that's really bad. 25 total. Armageddon probably a bit better. Nope, actually not. 11 on a day. That's kind of bad. For the Galente ones, let's see, those manage around 50, so again a bit better. Caldari the best, and then Minmatar is probably gonna be really bad. Yeah, also 9 on a day. 17 on a day. Tempest wise less than 25, Typhoon wise less than 25. Yeah, this is actually both depressing but also hopeful in a way. Seeing a lot of these go up together with Tritanium, there's bound to be the major catalyst behind this increase in price here all of a sudden. But it also shows that, well, nobody's actively doing this anymore. And so if you are looking into production and you actually are not interested in like massive production, which for older veteran players is definitely what they want, right? They want to scale up so that they can scale up their profits. But if you're newer to this, then of course trying to make maybe 1 or 2 battleships and being able to sell them at a nice margin might just be the thing for you. And then of course stuff like this Armageddon spike, you know, up to 160 million all of a sudden, where before it was 130. Potentially there is a profit to be made there for smaller industrialists, because this market has become absolutely tiny. So very interesting suggestion. I might actually take a look at some other Tech 1 markets in the upcoming weeks as well. But for now, that's gonna be it for this EVE Talk. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.